Hello everyone, and welcome to this video podcast on the last days. My name is David, and the title of this episode is Signs of the Times and the Parable of the Fig Tree, Part 1, with a subtitle of Signs, Signs, and More Signs. This is episode 16. In early December of 1830 and January of 1831, the prophet Joseph Smith received two revelations pertaining to the preaching of the gospel to the poor and meek, along with instructions for newly baptized members that were in addition to their being baptized in water and receiving the gift of the Holy Ghost by the laying on of hands. These two additional instructions might surprise you, since we Latter-day Saints don't normally include them as part of what we consider to be the basic gospel program as listed in the fourth article of faith. Regardless, these two early church decrees are as follows: "And they shall learn the parable of the fig tree, and shall be looking forth for the signs of my coming." Let's take a moment to read each of these two early church decrees in context. The December 1830 revelation reads as follows: "And the poor and the meek shall have the gospel preached unto them, and they shall be looking forth for the time of my coming, for it is nigh at hand. And they shall learn the parable of the fig tree, for even now already summer is nigh." And the January 1831 revelation reads, "And again it shall come to pass, that on as many as ye shall baptize with water, ye shall lay your hands, and they shall receive the gift of the Holy Ghost, and shall be looking forth for the signs of my coming." Many Latter-day Saints in our day would be surprised to discover that preaching the gospel to the poor and the meek included their learning the parable of the fig tree. And we would also be surprised to learn that not only is baptism to be followed by receiving the gift of the Holy Ghost, but by our looking forth for the signs of Christ's coming. The next time you attend a baptismal service, keep these two early church decrees in mind, and ask yourself why the Lord considered it important to include them along with the basic principles and ordinances of the gospel. Another question you might ask yourself is this: why is learning the parable of the fig tree such a big deal? In many respects, we have already answered that question, for in 3 earlier episodes I highlighted the fact that discerning and looking forth for the signs of Christ's coming was a big deal, because the second coming was a big deal, and that the second coming was a big deal because, for the wicked at least, the second coming of Christ was an extinction-level event on the same level and magnitude as the Great Flood, and even, if true, the extinction of the dinosaurs. I would suggest, then, that you go back and review these 3 episodes, as I covered a lot of preliminary material pertaining to the importance of watching for the signs of Christ's coming in the clouds of heaven, clothed with power and great glory, all of which is intertwined with the parable of the fig tree. In any event, the short answer as to why learning the parable of the fig tree is a big deal is because the second coming of Christ is a big deal. In fact, Elder Bruce R. McConkie considered the parable of the fig tree to be among the 3 greatest parables pertaining to the second coming. In his book, The Millennial Messiah, and under the heading of The 3 Great Parables of His Coming, Elder McConkie writes, "Our blessed Lord, who spake as none other ever has spoken or shall speak, included in his parables numerous allusions to and pronouncements about his second coming. The parables involved teach many lessons. We shall consider what are probably the 3 greatest parables pertaining to the second coming. He then goes on to discuss them in this order. First, the parable of the wheat and the tares. Then, the parable of the 10 virgins. And lastly, the parable of the fig tree. In his final book, A New Witness for the Articles of Faith, Elder McConkie made these interesting remarks. Truly, the signs of the times are many. No man can name them all, and all of them come as a warning, and to prepare the way before the face of him who yet shall reign in triumph and glory. The saints of the Most High have power to read the signs of the times. They need not be deceived as to what has been and what yet shall be, all as a prelude to the ushering in of the great millennium. Accordingly, all those with understanding are watching, seeking to be ready, and striving to prepare themselves to abide the day of his coming. That is, they know and recognize the things that must occur before the second coming, and thus are in a position to have an intelligent opinion as to when the great and dreadful day of the Lord will come. As Elder McConkie stated, the parables involved teach many lessons, and one of the lessons comes from placing them in sequential order, in which order might explain why learning the parable of the fig tree was brought up first to the new converts. Next, the parable of the wheat and tares, followed by the parable of the 10 virgins. As we move left to right then, we have the parable of the fig tree associated with watching and preparation for the second coming. Then the parable of the wheat and tares associated with the coming great division and separation of the righteous from the wicked, followed by the parable of the 10 virgins associated with Christ's second coming and culmination of all the signs of the times, including the ushering in of the millennium. Let us highlight each parable and their sequential order with a single verse for each, beginning with what should be familiar now, the parable of the fig tree. And the poor and the meek shall have the gospel preached unto them, and they shall be looking forth for the time of my coming, for it is nigh at hand. And they shall learn the parable of the fig tree, for even now already summer is nigh. We then have the parable of the wheat and the tares, wherein it is written, the enemy that sowed them is the devil, the harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be in the end of this world. And finally, the parable of the 10 virgins, wherein it is also written, and at that day, when I shall come in my glory, shall the parable be fulfilled, which I spake concerning the 10 virgins. For they that are wise shall not be hewn down and cast into the fire, but shall abide the day. Now as to where we are in the year 2022, in this sequential timeline, it is at the tail end of the parable of the fig tree, which is associated with watching and preparation, and hence my emphasis on being Mount Zion ready. Once again then, you can see why it was the importance of learning the parable of the fig tree, and not the parable of the wheat and tares, or the parable of the 10 virgins, that came up first when preaching the gospel to the poor and the meek. The question of timing as to when all these momentous events are to take place, including the second coming of Christ, is, obviously, of major concern to all of us. And yet instead of giving us an exact timeline with future prophetic target dates, the Lord has chosen to give us the parable of the fig tree as a prophetic forecast as to the general proximity of his second coming. As to designating future target dates, recall these words of Elder M. Russell Ballard, who stated that you should be extremely wary of anyone who claims to know the timing of Christ's coming, no matter how compelling their arguments or how reasonable their calculations. Nonetheless, in the Doctrine and Covenants, chapter 68, verse 11, the saints are told the following, and unto you it shall be given to know the signs of the times, and the signs of the coming of the Son of Man. That is, as to the general proximity of his second coming. In any event, had the Lord wanted to give us future prophetic target dates, he would have done so. Instead, he has chosen to give us the parable of the fig tree, along with the signs of the times. Hence the importance of learning the parable of the fig tree and watching for the signs of the times, rather than counting down the days to the next future target date. Another helpful insight pertaining to the parable of the fig tree and watching for the signs of the times is Joseph Smith's inspired version of Matthew chapter 1, verse 23, which reads, "Behold, I speak these things unto you for the elect's sake, and you also shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all I have told you must come to pass, but the end is not yet." Now, if we turn this too into a sequential timeline, we would discover that the parable of the fig tree takes us so far, and only so far, that is, from December of 1830, wherein we are told that even now already summer is nigh, and on up to the date of June 2022 plus, meaning on up to June 2022 and onward, until all the signs of the times have been fulfilled, and we finally reach the day of Christ's coming, wherein the end is here, has truly arrived. The day and hour of Christ's coming is, of course, a big unknown, since we are dealing with the prophetic black box time frame, spoken of in earlier episodes, and which simply acknowledges the fact that God's 6,000-year timeline could be off 30, 50, even 70 years or more, and which is precisely why there can be no future prophetic target dates predicting the coming of the Lord in the clouds of heaven. Again, the parable of the fig tree was given to us to prepare for Christ's coming instead of designated future target dates. Nevertheless, there are several things we know with certitude. That is, already summer is nigh, but the end is not yet. For all I have told you must come to pass first, and all before the end is here. Another way of making the same point is to lay things out in this sequential order and to answer the following three questions. Some of the signs have come to pass. Yes. Many of the signs have come to pass. Yes, a great many. All of the signs have come to pass. No, for there are a good many yet to be fulfilled. Two things of great importance, then, can be learned from the parable of the fig tree, and that is the following. Already summer is nigh, but the end is not yet. This, then, should be the headline news of our day, and not the notion that the end is here. We are now ready to learn the parable of the fig tree, which can be found in the Scriptures in two places, the first of which is in Matthew chapter 24, verses 32 through 33, and the second of which can be found in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 45, verses 37 through 38. Let us take a moment to read through each rendition. Matthew chapter 24, verses 32 through 33, reads as follows. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender, and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, signs of the times, know that it is near, even at the doors. Doctrine and Covenants, chapter 45, verses 37 through 38, reads as follows. Ye look and behold the fig trees, and ye see them with your eyes, and ye say when they begin to shoot forth, and their leaves are yet tender, that summer is now nigh at hand. Even so it shall be in that day, when they shall see all these things. Then shall they know that the hour is nigh. Obviously, the parable of the fig tree and the signs of the times are related to one another in the sense that each leaf of the fig tree could be representative of a particular sign of the times, such that as each sign of the times is fulfilled, another fig leaf appears on the fig tree, all indicating that the time of Christ's coming is drawing nearer and nearer with each additional fig leaf. Because of this, many last days enthusiasts have concluded wrongly that enough signs of the times have been fulfilled to conclude not that summer is nigh, but rather that the end is here. So let's take a brief moment to examine that error. Recall our three views about the end times from our last episode, with the end is here, finally, as in rapture ready, with an attitude of take me now. Then we have the end is here, yikes, as in prepper ready, with an attitude of bring it on. And lastly, we have the end is here, with a pushback of not so, as in what I have already referred to as Mount Zion ready, with a think generational attitude. Now when we apply the parable of the fig tree and the fulfillment of the signs of the times to these three views of the end times, we find that both the evangelical rapture ready and survivalist prepper ready adherents believe that the great many signs having been fulfilled proves their point that the end is here, and disproves the idea that the end is not here. But on closer examination, one comes to realize that nowhere does the parable of the fig tree ever say that the end is here. Rather, what the parable of the fig tree says over and over again is that the end is nigh, even at the doors, but not as yet here. And so we see that the parable of the fig tree actually disproves both the rapture ready and prepper ready adherents' insistence that the end is here, and proves the Mount Zion ready adherents' position that the end is nigh, but not as yet here, as in already summer is nigh, but the end is not yet. Before closing out part 1 of this episode on the signs of the times and the parable of the fig tree, let's present the big picture and see if we cannot capture the significance of what we have covered so far, and as to why it is important to limit the parable of the fig tree to what it says and not read into it more than it is able to bear. So, for example, here we have the limits of the parable of the fig tree, which declares that already summer is nigh, but the end is not yet. And this is made obvious in the fact that the three cleansing and redemption projects that I have mentioned in previous episodes have yet to be fulfilled. Now when we add the prophetic black box time frame to our diagram, then we are not caught designating or suggesting any future target dates as to when any of these three projects will be initiated or completed. However, it is possible to place the three parables in this timeline, with the parable of the fig tree coming first and carrying us on into Project 1, with the parable of the wheat and the tares coming next and falling between Projects 1 and 2, and with the parable of the 10 virgins coming last and falling between Projects 2 and 3. This then is the big picture, and is why we can confidently say, along with Elder Boyd K. Packer, that the world is not going to come to an end anytime soon. And why? Because as President Russell M. Nelson stated, there is too much to do, particularly if we are to become Mount Zion ready, which seems to be weighing upon President Nelson's mind as of late. We end then with yet another prophetic timeline alert, and that is to encourage everyone to learn the parable of the fig tree. For even now, already summer is nigh, but the end is not yet. This completes part 1 of this 2-part series, and so we invite you to watch the next episode, episode 17, which is also titled Signs of the Times and the Parable of the Fig Tree, Part 2, with a subtitle of Signs, Signs, and More Signs. Thank you for watching. Push the like button if you enjoyed this episode, and be sure to push the subscribe button. Until next time, stay vigilant, for ye know neither the day nor the hour of his coming.